Mr. President, I rise today to offer some thoughts and observations about the presidency of George W. Bush as his time in office comes to a close. This is truly a time to thank God for our country, for our system of government, and for our liberty unparalleled in the history of the world. President Bush served at a time of great challenge and even crisis for our country, and I want to focus on him both as a president and a person. When America's founders gathered in Philadelphia in 1787, it is said that someone asked Benjamin Franklin, the Constitutional Convention's oldest delegate, what form of government was under construction. He famously answered, "A republic, if you can keep it." James Madison defined a republic as a government which derives its powers from the people, a principle enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. One way we work to keep our republic is by the people choosing those who will govern them. In his farewell address in 1837, President Andrew Jackson said, "But you must remember, my fellow citizens, that eternal vigilance by the people is the price of liberty, and that you must pay the price if you wish to secure the blessing," unquote. Elections and transitions of power are part of that vigilance, part of keeping our republic, in order that we might, in the words of the Constitution's preamble, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Every transition goes from something to something, and occasions a look at what is concluding as well as what is beginning. With the inauguration of President-elect Obama around the corner, the flurry of confirmation activity here in the Senate regarding his nominees and the intense focus on economic and other challenges, much of our attention is rightly focused on the future. But we look to the future from a present shaped by the past. Only by understanding where we have been can we have the ability, perspective, and confidence to act today and plan for tomorrow. Though a presidency has a beginning and an end, it is simply part of the flow of events. Presidents inherit situations they did not create and create situations that they then leave to their successors. They may get credit for successes they did not produce and escape blame for failures that do not materialize until after they leave office. That is the nature of political life in America. And while we focus on the individual, the president, I think it is more appropriate to speak of an administration, the presidency. There are hundreds and hundreds of people who serve at the pleasure of the president to develop and implement his agenda. All of this makes very difficult even describing, let alone evaluating, something as multifaceted as the Bush presidency. Some of President Bush's critics almost reflexively look at opinion polls, noting that his approval rating has sunk. I do not have to tell anyone serving in public office about the allure as well as the danger of this particular reflex. Polls are snapshots. They are not motion pictures. And the pollster is the photographer. He chooses the subject, the lighting, and the angle. He frames the shot and determines how the final picture turns out. The Bush presidency was bookended by national crises: the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, and the financial crisis before us today. Not surprisingly, as the Washington Post pointed out a few days ago, President Bush enjoyed the highest approval rating in late 2001 and nearly the lowest in late 2008 in the history of the Post's reporting. Once again, that is just the nature of political life in America and comes with the presidential territory. While President Bush's approval rating has many ups and downs, one thing has remained absolutely constant. His approval rating has been consistently higher than ours in the Congress. The website pollingreport.com shows that dozens of national polls in the last couple of years have given Congress an approval rating in the tens, down to a measly 12%, while President Bush has never had one that low. And we in the Congress have the advantage of getting lost in the crowd when we want to, blaming such dismal public sentiment on the institution while insisting that, as individual members, we are certainly much more popular. The president never has that luxury. The polls do not ask whether Americans approve of his administration, but whether they approve of him. President Bush knows that it is tough to lead if you follow the polls. As he said in an interview last month, he did not compromise his soul to be a popular guy. George W. Bush is not leaving the presidency with chapped fingers from holding them up to the political wind. His critics spin that as stubbornness, saying that he wants to go it alone. I fully expect that many of those same Bush critics will praise the next president for the very same thing. One man's principle, I suppose, is another man's inflexibility. But as President Bush said at Texas A&M University, popularity is fleeting, but character and conscience are sturdy. The only test that matters, he said, is going home at night, looking in the mirror and being satisfied that you have done what is right. Politics, of course, is about disagreement and competing ideas, priorities, and policies. Conservative leader and thinker, my good friend Paul Weyrich, who passed away last month, has written about what he called constructive polarization. That is the idea that clearly defined and clearly different choices and alternatives can be constructive for the electoral and political process. Disagreement and competition help us to focus and refine ideas, to work harder at finding the best solution. But I regret to say that there is often today more effort at enraging than engaging, and that along with disagreement has come disrespect. Too often an opponent is treated not simply as wrong, but as rotten. And that is when the distinction between the office and the individual who holds it breaks down, and political objectives take precedence over institutional principles. I have seen that destructive trend over the last 8 years, and I hope for the sake of the next president and for our country it does not continue. I join President Bush, who has said that the tone in Washington got worse rather than better during his presidency, and I urge my colleagues and all others who participate in our political process to do some real soul-searching about this. In addition to looking at the polls, it is easy when looking back at a presidency to look no further than most recent events. The financial and economic situation has deteriorated so fast in the last several months, and the difficulties have spread so quickly and loomed so large that it is difficult to see anything that came before. The truth is, however, that we experienced a record economic expansion before that downturn occurred. 52 months of uninterrupted job creation. Another mistake in evaluating a presidency is a simple one. We act as if we know everything that can be known, that the jury could possibly have already come back with the verdict. The jury is still out and will remain there for a long time, which is why we more properly talk about history judging a president. As President Bush put it in one interview, folks are still writing books analyzing President George Washington. President George Bush is not going to worry about it. President Harry Truman's own party discouraged him from running for re-election, and he left office with an approval rating even lower than President Bush will. Yet today is mentioned among the 20th century's best presidents and one of my favorite presidents of all time. The facts of what President Bush has done, not to mention their effects, will not be fully understood or even known by most Americans for many years to come. In evaluating a presidency, we should also look not only at individual programs or neatly numerical accomplishments, but also at the challenges that cannot be reduced to charts, graphs, or bullet points. President Bush certainly came into office with goals to achieve, problems to solve, and situations to handle. He had offered concrete proposals and made campaign promises. There's a long list of bills he signed, programs he initiated, appointments he made, and other concrete achievements that can be measured and listed. I will mention some of those in just a minute. But the president-elect has